I can't find the proof of the duty I paid on a vessel, but Customs and Border Protection can look it up in their records.
False in most cases.
So my boat is not imported into the U.S. and I have not paid duty on it. It is illegal for a broker to offer my boat for sale to U.S. residents while in U.S. waters.
That is correct.
Importing a catamaran built in South Africa now carries a 30% surcharge due to new tariffs introduced in 2025.
That is correct.
Hello and welcome to Full Displacement, the Current Yachts podcast. Today we're delighted to have a guest, Michelle Terorotua from Compass Logistics Marine, and we're going to introduce Michelle and her expertise in a second. So I just wanted to welcome back Amanda to the program.
Hello, Maryline. Hello, Michelle.
Hello, everyone.
And so let's start with, what does a customs broker do, Michelle? And it's my understanding that you're specialized in yachts. So tell us a little bit about your background, your expertise, and what do you do on a day-to-day basis?
I specialize in yachts, airplanes, and high-end automobiles, and also foreign trade zone marinas for yachts. So we collect the necessary documents, we do our due diligence, and file entries for people. So that's my day-to-day work, basically.
And tell us, how long have you been customs broker with those specialties now?
39 years.
Wow.
Oh, that's amazing.
Talk about knowing your trade. That's for certain.
Yes, for sure.
The first thing that I wanted to really cover for background with you, Michelle, is tell us what's happened actually in 2025. What is the major development that yacht owners, sellers have had to contend with and call you for?
Well, the big question at the beginning of the year was always, what is my duty going to be? Do can you look into your magic 8 ball and figure out what duty amount I'm going to have to pay when we had the tariff rates changing constantly from week to week or day to day? That was the biggest influx of inquiries at the beginning of the year. And of course, I do not have a crystal ball, and no, I could not tell you what it is or what I thought it was going to be, because what I might think is far from reality. So once we somewhat had the negotiations with these other governments, such as the EU, specifically Great Britain, we then had a number obviously to work from: 10% for Great Britain, 15% for the EU. And then we found out that AGOA, which is the African Growth and Opportunity Act, which I knew was going to expire in September, which gave duty-free treatment to South African-built yachts, was not going to be renewed. And then they were going to be hit with a 30% duty rate. So just those nations and that group of nations specifically, where a huge number of the catamarans and sailboats come from, was really hit adversely.
So for these countries you were just mentioning, say France, where a lot of, say, lagoons and Fontaine-Pajot catamarans in particular are made in the monohulls to Jeanneau, Beneteau, and so forth. We've seen those single-digit duty and taxes rates jump to over 15%. Is that what you're seeing?
That is correct. So anything in the EU, France specifically, but also Italy and every other country that manufactures, are now hit with a 15% tariff.
And for background's sake, for people that don't know what the rates, the import duties were historically, I remember you telling me it could be anywhere from 1.8 to 2%. So now you're saying on top of those import duties, you're having to pay an extra 15% for French-made boats, or 30% even for South African boats. Is that correct?
So when it reaches the 15% duty rate, you don't pay the 1.5%, you pay 15. When it's up to the 10%, you're going to pay the 10% plus 1.5, so 11.5%. So the threshold is basically anything over 10%. You don't pay the additional duty in most instances, but of course, everything has a variable. So nothing is just black and white. There's a lot of variables.
And if there's one thing we've learned, is that it's subject to change, right? With very little notice, you've had to
Absolutely.
Jump through a lot of hoops. Okay. The first conversation we wanted to dig into a little bit more with you is understanding that financial impact. So, what we're saying here is the real world implication of the big headline news is that concretely, if you have a 25% tariff on a boat that is $500,000 that is imported to the US at that number, I'm just hypothetically saying it's a 25%
Mhm.
tariff. That means your yacht is now, of course, 25% more expensive. When does
Correct.
this get paid, and is this applicable for new and pre-owned vessel? Talk to us through this a little bit.
Yes. So the duty rate is applicable to both new and used vessels. There's no distinguishing between the two. And it is paid at import. So once I prepare and file that entry with customs, you owe me, the customs broker, all of the fees, duties, taxes, import, bond, what Lacey Act filing, EPA filing. That is all due at that time because we then have to pay customs. Customs issues us a statement of how much money we owe them, and we have to pay them. So we like to collect our funds upfront to make sure that we pay on time. Otherwise, there's monetary penalties for not paying on time.
Right. And are there specific types or manufacturers that will be hit the hardest?
Um, well, if you're Chinese, then yeah, Chinese built boats, yachts, Aquilas and so forth. If they're imported, I'm not exactly sure the exact tariff amount for China right now, but I think it's around 45% possibly. So those boats are hit really hard.
And so it's very interesting as a boat buyer. Let's say you are going to buy an Aquila and you're going to the dealer. It's very important for you to say, does this price point that you're selling me this boat for include duty paid if you're going to be importing the boat into the United States? That's a very important question to be asked.
Yeah, it is definitely an important question to ask. Are you selling me a duty paid vessel?
Mhm.
Because as we well know, some of these vessels are delivered straight into charter. They might be U.S. documented, but they've never hit U.S. water. So they've never been imported because U.S. registry is not a litmus test for duty payment. The two don't talk to each other.
That was gonna be my next thought. Before we go there, one quick question though on who is concerned with those tariffs. We've heard through the news that occasionally there are exceptions made in different kind of goods and categories or industries. Are there any exception in yachts that perhaps are not obvious that you've learned about? No, no such thing.
No. There are no
Okay.
exceptions, no binding rulings that I have yet to see. I mean,
Okay.
that's not to say there can't be something in the works, but we won't know until the ruling comes forward, and those rulings usually take several months, maybe up to a year to come down, depending on the scope of it and how much additional information they might need at CBP. But I have not seen any exemptions anywhere so far.
Okay. Well, one can dream. So you
Yes,
were
yes.
starting to speak about boats that get delivered in charter, and this is a scenario that we deal with all the time
Yeah.
because this is the type of clientele that Amanda and I have become very close to and familiar with, have a lot of experience working with. And so let's break this down very clearly for our audience. If somebody has purchased a boat, say made in France, because a lot of the catamarans are made in France, and they put it in charter in the BVI, it's never come to the US, it's delivered straight there, perhaps on a cargo ship, it goes into charter for a year or two. What does this mean for this boat if I'm the seller and I want to, say, cruise the US if I keep it or if I sell it in the US? What are the implications?
So if they want to sell it in the US, it must be imported and duty paid so that you can legally offer it for sale to US residents and US waters. That's it. There's no workaround. There's there's just no way outside of that. Once it hits US water and you want to offer it for sale, you must have that boat imported and duty paid so that you can legally offer it for sale.
So it will cost me the 15% we were talking about.
It will currently
That's it.
cost you the 15%. Yes.
Is this based on the purchase price originally or at the time it is now? Say it's 3 years later from the time the boat's been in charter, from the time it was brand new.
If the bill of sale is less than a year old, we use that bill of sale. If the bill of sale is more than 2 years old, you have to get a valuation survey done for customs purposes. And then that survey is what we use to base the imported value on, and that's what the duty is assessed on as well.
Okay, that's good to know. Very good to know. And I know you said earlier there's no crystal ball, but do you foresee or have you heard of anything that these tariffs might be rolled back in the future? Maybe people
Well,
saying, hey, I'm just going to wait to sell my boat or import my boat or bring it here, thinking that maybe something will change?
well, we can wait to hear what the Supreme Court has to say about that. And, there's a lot of speculation. When is that going to happen? Some people say first quarter, some people say not till the second quarter. We don't know. We have no way of knowing. If they get repealed, then sure, you're back to 1.5%. If they don't get repealed, I would imagine they would remain the same. I would hope that there wouldn't be any more punitive tariffs implemented, but it's hard to say, honestly.
We were starting to speak about boat for sale in BVI, and then I was also
Mhm.
suggesting perhaps if I keep my boat, but I want to bring it now closer to me stateside, say in the Carolinas.
Okay, so if they have a US registry and they're a US resident, they are supposed to import it in duty pay. There is no cruising license for US documented vessels. And if the vessel is going to live in the United States, then yes, it should be imported in duty paid. Now, there is a ruling. There are instances where there's a beneficial US owner, but the vessel is only going to be in the United States for a brief stay, let's say 3 months. Maybe they're getting work done on it.
Right?
Based on this ruling, you're not required to import and pay duty on that vessel. You can do what's called the temporary import under bond, have your maintenance work done, and then depart the U.S. under customs supervision. So there are some rulings out there that can affect that. But if it is going to be longer than, let's say, a short period of 3 months, you really need to look into importing and duty paying your vessel if it's going to live in the United States.
Understood. So the next segment of this conversation, we actually wanted to see, well, so what are the workarounds? It sounds like there's not a lot of options.
No,
If you're
right.
going
No.
to bring your boat into the US, you will be subject to duty. We're not suggesting that anyone should go around the law. We're just trying to
No,
find
but
ways to
what
make
I can
things work.
comment on is what I am seeing. Many people are foreign flagging, let's say Marshall Islands, BVI, Cayman, whatever their choice is. Usually it's a British ensign state of some sort. They're foreign flagging and they're maintaining that foreign flag and getting cruising licenses when they're in the United States. So to that end, we're losing duty, US flag vessels, which to me, um, it doesn't seem right to lose US flag vessels, but that's what's happening. Keep in mind, you've ordered your boat 2 or 3 years ago. You budgeted for a 1.5% duty rate, and I always say use 2.1, 2.2% because that'll cover almost everything as far as import fees. They didn't budget for 15% duty. That to a lot of people, especially when they're retiring, they've sold their home. This boat is where they're going to live for the next few years while they do whatever they do in the Caribbean. That's a lot of money. So they're having to make the hard choice to flag outside the United States because
Mhm.
they did not budget for that money. These are not, 20, $50 million yachts where maybe if they decided to ever import that boat, they could probably afford the duty. These are smaller boats. These are family boats often. And again, those people did not budget for that extra, 13.5% duty that they're now going to have to pay. So that's what we're seeing a lot of.
Can I see if I understand that correctly? Michelle, when you say that a foreign flag vessel can come into US waters on a cruising permit, and let's say they need to get some work done on the boat, how long have you seen these cruising permits being given for? Is there such thing as a 12-month cruising permit? How does that work?
There is. Traditionally, a cruising license is for 12 months. However, CBP in the recent years has started to issue them for less time. And that is often based on how long the beneficial owner says they're going to be in the United States. Oftentimes they fly in and out for whatever reason, or how long is your registry valid for? If your registry expires in 3 months, they're going to give you a 3-month cruising license. You will have to then come back with your new registry and apply or ask for an additional time frame should that beneficial owner be in the United States for an extended period. So that is usually how the cruising licenses work these days.
That makes sense.
And just to clarify how foreign flagging works, this would be an owner working with a specialist, right? A maritime lawyer to handle this paperwork. This is no longer in your wheelhouse, right? You're dealing strictly with
Right.
importing those vessels and handling the cruising permits.
Mm. So I was going to say, you do not have to use a maritime attorney to flag your vessel outside the United States. There are certainly instances where that would be your best option. But you can also work with an experienced documentation agent. And that agent is able to form your foreign entity, because do not foreign flag your boat and then leave it with a U.S. name and a U.S. address. Duty can be forced upon you as a U.S. resident, as the beneficial owner. So they can form your foreign entity for you and register your vessel for you. So again, there are definitely times when a maritime attorney would be your best option, but oftentimes a really good experienced documentation agent can do the same thing.
It's good to know.
Yes, really good advice. Of course, as yacht brokers, we're concerned when there are boat owners who are forced to sell and their vessel has not been imported to the US. And we're finding that there are other brokers who may not be following the law. And sometimes they are not trained to actually recognize that they are breaking the law. So that's a problem. But my question would be, what are the implications for brokers who are, knowingly or unknowingly breaking the law by advertising a boat for sale in U.S. waters when duty has not been paid?
Well, if customs comes across this ad, or they're doing a check at the docks, which sometimes they do, your vessel can be detained and seized at the worst. Usually the vessels are detained. It gives you an opportunity to basically come right with the government, but not every port is going to be lenient. Every district, I should say, the port directors to allowed to interpret and apply the regulations as they see fit. Here in South Florida, I know there's a huge push for illegal operations going on. Your vessel might be detained, but you're given an opportunity to make it right. In other jurisdictions, they may not even be as knowledgeable about yachts and yacht operations and responsibilities, and they may take a very, punitive view towards it, or they may take a lenient view. But the bottom line is any vessel that is offered for sale to U.S. residents while in U.S. waters and is not duty paid is being done so against regulation.
And you brought up a special term there. You said not for sale to US residents while in US waters. That's
That is
actually a
correct.
checkbox that we brokers have to display when advertising a vessel. So let's say,
Correct.
you know, the boat is in the US waters, the person hasn't paid the duty. We can then advertise it if that is clearly saying not for sale to US residents while in US waters. And what I would have to say is if someone is a Canadian, and they're saying, I'm going to bring this boat up back to Canada. I'd like to see this boat while it's in Florida. That is the only legal time as a Florida licensed broker can actually walk someone on that vessel to show it to them. So
Correct.
that is something that we just found out recently wasn't even working on the largest MLS platform and had to bring it to their attention that that little box,
Wow.
when you check it, didn't work.
Wow. Because it does have to be on all your digital and paper advertising, and it should also have a placard on the vessel. There should be something on the vessel that says the same thing. And I like to err on the side of caution. It's my due diligence to my clients. Here's what you can do, here's what you can't do, here's what you really shouldn't do. And here, put a placard. We have a client now that has a vessel under temporary import under bond, and I had them put signage on it that says, "This is a sample, not for sale." So it's the same thing. If you can show that boat all you want as a sample, people can order a very similar boat, but you just can't sell that boat right there. So,
And we actually have come across this very situation with a seller who has his boat listed with a broker, did not realize that his boat just arriving from BVI is now subject to duty. And we are trying to guide him and doing the right thing because what he is attempting to do is illegal. And now he will realize that he could be forced to be paying this duty. He will no longer have a choice when he didn't even realize this was going to be the case. So please,
yes.
sellers, do your due diligence.
Yeah, you should do your due diligence. You can't just say, "Oh, I didn't know." That's not an answer. That's not an answer customs will accept either. You could, petition and plead your case and all, but honestly, saying I didn't know, and even for a yacht broker saying I didn't know, why don't you know? This is not new news. This is not something they've just come up with. And I know down here in South Florida, they take a great pains to educate the yacht brokers in the International Yacht Brokers Association, which used to be Florida Yacht Brokers. But they do a good job of educating people. And I think other associations, other brokerage associations should take a page from their playbook and start educating. Because I find the more north you go, the less people tend to know, these requirements and these regulations. But I get a lot of calls now from brokers in your area up there, and I'm so happy to receive them because that means somebody is talking. Somebody say, "Hey, wait a minute, call Michelle or have her explain to you, or at least find out and ask some questions." I'm happy to answer questions. I'd rather have you ask me than have someone's vessel become detained. Now, I can't always help everybody, but I would say 9 times out of 10, I can probably help them.
Yeah. And that's great to hear, Michelle. That's why I always refer my clients to you.
Thank you.
The client that we're discussing has been up north. Their vessel has been advertised now for a good couple months, and there was no idea of the implications of
Yeah,
that.
it's a shame, it really is.
Well, let's go back to what Michelle mentioned earlier because those are two important, I call them hoops because they are a little bit of a pain, but they are required. And so we have to follow the law. There's two major topics that you deal with, Michelle, a lot. And we're trying to help our buyers and sellers understand these two compliance checkbox, if you would. The first one is regarding EPA regulations for engine. Can you speak
Right.
to that a little bit? What does EPA compliance mean?
Yes. So your engines and it really includes your generators too. They
And
have
the
to meet
generator, okay.
EPA requirements that were in effect on the date of that engine's manufacture. So, currently there's going to be very few vessels that will actually have what we call an ancient engine that would be exempt. So, the EPA part of it is very important. We want to see the label off of the vessel to make sure that when you're filling out that document and signing this government document and telling me your engine meets compliance, I want a photograph of the placard that tells me that very same thing. If you do not have a placard on your engine, then the possibility exists it's not a US specification engine, and that will prevent your boat from being imported. Now, the other important one is the Lacey Act. The Lacey Act has always existed, but I think was it January of last year? Or no, December of last year, they started enforcing it. So any vessel manufactured after December 31st, 2007 is required to comply with the Lacey Act. And the Lacey Act governs wood and wood products that are used to build your vessel or that are installed in your vessel. And this information comes from the builder themselves. And initially, we had a lot of pushback, especially from the builders. What I know is that this very same requirement has existed in the EU since 2013. So they have this information. They just maybe didn't want to hand it out. We now have, I would say, 98% of the builders, the factories, whomever, representatives have everything we need for the Lacey Act form. Because without that form, again, your vessel could be denied entry. It could be penalized monetarily. I think the penalty is like $8,000. And, currently, the government likes money. So I would not want to be the one receiving that letter from the government saying you owe me $8,000 because you couldn't figure out your Lacey Act form. And really, it's just doing the best you can, especially if you have an older boat, 2008, 2009. It might be a little more difficult, but if you do your due diligence and you try really, really hard, the government will accept that you tried really, really hard. But do your best is all I can say when it comes to the Lacey form. But those are two very important components when importing a vessel. Doesn't matter if it's, a 20-foot runabout or a 300-foot big boat. They all have to comply with the same requirements.
And so, in terms that everyone can understand, that means teak that are on the decks. That means some of the
Yes.
interior hardwoods that some of the
Yes.
cabinetry
Yes.
may be made out of, things like that, that
Hmm.
most people wouldn't even think through and say, oh, and
Exactly.
and it's on the owner to then call the manufacturer and to help get the
Yes.
origin of these things to be able to fill out that
Exactly.
Lacey Act form, correct?
Yeah, there's a lot of things that are prohibited. Again, being teak, the Burmese or Myanmar, or whatever you want to call it these days, teak. Exotic hardwoods from Africa. There are certain hardwoods that are also prohibited, and of course, anything from Russia currently. Those types of woods are prohibited. They want to know the genus and the species, the country of harvest, the percentage in the value of that component. So it can be quite involved.
So I have a case for you, a situation. We have a French built boat that has been duty paid, imported, second owner, and he installed a wood table, very fancy cockpit wood table on this vessel. He's got the documentation from the prior owner for the Lacey Act on the importation. Should he supplement this information with an additional form to confirm the source of the wood of the table, fixed wood table that he added to the boat? What do we do in this case?
Okay. It depends. Where did he purchase the wood table and where was it installed? In the United States, out of the United
So
States?
we're going to ask him the question. Actually, we're talking about
So
this at
that's
this
what's
very
important.
moment. Yeah.
If he purchased it in the US from a supplier and it was installed in the US, he just needs to maintain those paper records in the vessel's permanent records. And I also would suggest that he have a copy of the customs entry from the prior owner on the vessel, because somewhere down the road somebody's going to ask, and did you ever import this boat and pay the duty, and he will have the paper proof right there. So I would recommend he do that as well. But if it was done here domestically from a domestic supplier, he just needs to keep those records. If he somehow went to, I don't know, Martinique and he ordered a table from France, he needs to have all of that information, because actually any repairs or work done outside the United States, when that boat returns to the US, the value of those repairs are dutiable. So if he spent 10K on a table, that 10K table is now importable and dutiable once that vessel returns to the US.
What about labor? Same thing. If we purchase a
Yeah.
generator, we install it in the
Any
Bahamas, the labor is dutiable.
Everything is dutiable that's done outside the United States.
Oh, we need to make sure everybody knows this.
Yes, that's very interesting. I didn't even know that.
And one other thing I wanted to mention, that particular owner says he's got it somewhere, right? The entry summary, the form that confirms duty
Mhm,
was paid. We've
mhm.
requested it, hasn't found it yet. And you have mentioned to us before, you cannot duplicate this document. In other words, if proof that duty was paid cannot be produced, duty will have to be paid again.
It can be. It depends on the jurisdiction that you're in. Here,
It's in
in
Florida in that
South
case.
Florida, we have in writing that if you cannot substantiate your claim with documentation, then it is no claim. It didn't happen, and you will have to re-import. I've had it happen. I've unfortunately had it happen, and they had to pay duty on the vessel because they could not prove that it was imported.
Wow.
Words are words. Documentary proof is the only thing the government is going to accept from you.
Wow, so much good advice, Michelle. This is so timely and so critical. I can't thank you enough. Now, I want to wrap this up a little bit into practical
Mhm.
advice for our buyers and sellers. So,
Right.
for someone currently shopping for a boat overseas, then summarize for us what should they do right now before they even contemplate an offer? What are some of the questions they should ask?
Well, number one, are you selling me an imported duty paid vessel? That if you're going to take possession of it in the United States and close domestically, you should have an imported duty paid vessel. If you're taking delivery of a vessel outside the United States and you're going to pick it up in La Rochelle or wherever, you are the responsible party for importing and duty paying that vessel. So you need to factor that into what your offer is, I guess, and what you're willing to pay, considering what the duty amount is. Those are two very important things to know. And of course, again, if your vessel is US documented, that does not mean it has been imported and duty paid. People get very confused about that.
Very important. And we had talked a little bit about this because I had called you with a question for some other client of ours. Talk us through the process and the timeline to pay the duty. Let's say somebody has obviously negotiated a price, w- taking into consideration the fact that the boat was not duty paid and will now have to import this boat and pay for the duty. They hire you. What's the process and how long does it take?
Well, once we have our documents in hand and everything we need, depending on where in the country you are, about 48 hours from receipt of everything.
Okay.
Other places I know up the coast, it can take a week. West Coast San Diego takes sometimes a good week. If you're in the LA region, they always want to come and look at the boat. That can take longer than a week. If you're in the Northeast on the northern border, Canadian borders, sometimes it can take a couple of weeks. Just depends on where you are, where customs is and how many staff they have and if they want to come look at it or not.
Understood.
Baltimore is pretty quick. South Florida, pretty quick, 48 hours usually.
And the paperwork that you mentioned, what is that? What are some of the examples of the paperwork?
So what we need as a customs broker, the first thing we need is what's called the U.S. Customs Power of Attorney. And then we need to know a little bit about you and who owns your boat and who's going to own your boat. Are you buying it as an individual person or are you buying it as an US LLC? So your LLC has to be formed before I can import your boat. So that's an important step. We have to see a copy of your passport. We need a copy of your purchase and sale agreement. We need a copy of your EPA and your Lacey Act. And then we need to know, where's your boat? Is it already here? Is it coming out of cargo ship? Are you sailing on your own bottom? We had one that just came in last week, delayed by weather, finally arrived in Charleston, filed the entry, had it cleared the same day. So that was super quick. I wasn't expecting Charleston to move that fast, but they did.
And the
So,
value of the vessel is always determined with what's written on the bill of sale at that time?
it is always what's written on the purchase sale agreement, bill of sale, whatever's that you have. And also, one thing to consider, if you pay it in euros or foreign currency, your conversion rate is based on the date that you departed from that foreign country, not today's
Interesting.
date, not last week's date, but the date that you left the foreign port. And that is what we have to use. And it's based on customs conversion rate as well, not the daily rate that you might see
Interesting.
Okay.
online. Customs has
Interesting.
specific conversion rates that we have to use, and they may differ from what is published.
Okay, that is also something I did not know before. And we
Yeah,
prepped for this
I
conversation with
know.
Michelle, and there's so many little
And there's
details.
things I'm learning too.
This
Wow.
is why,
There's a lot of layers. Again,
for
the boat
sure,
that arrived in I think it was Charleston last week. I had the same conversation with them. But well, we left the Canary Islands on such. I'm like, no, that doesn't count. It's when did you leave France? I need your exit document. That is a date I have to use. That is conversion rate I have to use. So there's a lot of layers and a lot of levels that are, would be a much more, I think, in-depth conversation. But this is a really good, I think, overview of, what you
for
as
sure.
the importer or you as the yacht broker and me as the customs broker needs or has to do. And, where our onus is. Our onus is to federal government. They license us. So my client is secondary, unfortunately. So I have to make sure that I abide by all the rules and regulations, no matter what they may be. I can't do anything other than what's in the regulations.
Absolutely.
Understood. Yeah.
What do you think, what do you see is the most common mistake or what trips people up in this process, Michelle? What's the most common problem that you come and clean up for others, perhaps if they've done it incorrectly?
So the most common thing I get is the 11th hour email or phone call that says, we have to close tomorrow. And we just realized the boat's never been imported.
Oh,
And that is unfortunately the most common call that we get, then we have to scramble. We have to stop everything we're doing to try and make this happen for these people so they don't have to push closing. Sometimes closing has to be pushed though, and we, for whatever reason, documentation, lack of documentation, we cannot get it done in 24 hours, maybe 48 hours or longer. But
Yeah.
that's the most common. But I get more and more calls these days asking me, what do I do? Can you guide? And those are the better phone calls. Here, let me
Yes.
tell
Sure.
you what you need to do before you get yourself in a mess. So, which I appreciate those calls today.
What is your biggest piece of advice, Michelle, to someone that calls you or to
Gosh.
our listeners?
I guess is do your homework. Be diligent. You need to know what you're getting into and don't always rely on someone else to know what you're getting into. Do your due diligence, do some research. You're not buying something at Target. So it's a much bigger deal.
100%. And we see this be true with yacht brokers too. Ask questions and find out if this person will be competent to guide you. We're not a customs broker. We're not a maritime attorney. We're not an insurance broker, but we will know who you should talk to based upon the information you give us. And to your point, Michelle, to avoid these last minute surprises, there are two essential things that we do at Current Yachts. One, we verify that you are the owner of the vessel. And so we don't have
Yes.
this last minute, oh, this boat was all in an LLC and we didn't realize it and it's not in good standing and this and that. And we obviously want to avoid any situation where a boat is offered for sale, but they are not in authority. There is not actually a path there. So we get this out of the way very early. And the second thing is the duty paid. And as a buyer, you should do the same. It is too important to overlook. So
Yes.
Absolutely. I would definitely agree with all of that. It is extremely important to do your homework and know what you're getting. This is a lot of money. Why would you rely on someone else to make decisions for you when this is your few hundred to a million, couple $1 million? That's a lot of money. So I wouldn't rely on anybody, not even to buy me a set of tires. I would want to do that myself.
thank you so much, Michelle. We really appreciate all of your insights. If you enjoyed this conversation with Michelle, please give us a like and subscribe to follow the Full Displacement podcast. We'd love to have your questions. So if you have more questions for Michelle, we go into deeper levels of understanding of certain topics. Go ahead. And thank you so much for watching. Thank you, Michelle, and hope to see you on the water. Fair winds, guys.
Thank you.
Fair winds. Thank you.